Hello, welcome back, everyone. It's Christine Bottagaro, and we are ushering in the second part of the day here. We're going to shift gears a little bit.
Welcome back, everyone. It's
Apologies.
Christine Bottagaro, and we are...
There we go. And we are now shifting gears and moving to API and software development governance. And I'm actually very excited to hear this next talk by Brenton House. And Brenton is Vice President of Digital Evangelism over at Software AG, and it's 5 keys to surviving the API apocalypse. So it looks like you're already well equipped, Brenton, with your protection shades.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear what we all need to know. So thank you.
Hey, thanks, Christine. All right, let's get this party started. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Brenton House, and I equip organizations to be successful in creating secure API strategies. Now, I've created an unconventional and somewhat unique technique that integrates visual storytelling to leverage my many years of API experience. And I use this all in my role of a Vice President for Digital Evangelism at Software AG to tell the story of APIs, API security, and API strategy. Now, I'm here today to make sure that you are prepared for the API apocalypse. I'm going to give you the 5 keys that you need to know to survive and thrive in this API future. But before we go there, let's take a look at what's going on right now. According to a recent report by Domo, in the next 60 seconds, people will watch 694,000 hours of videos on YouTube. Twitter users will post about 575,000 tweets. Slack users will send 148,000 messages. Google will conduct 5.7 million searches. 12 million people will send an iMessage, and people will watch 167 million videos on TikTok. Now, this list goes on, but there's one thing in common. All of these services and more are powered by APIs. This API economy that we live in has found its way into every organization, into people's houses, into smartphones, smart cars, smart watches, smart refrigerators, and smart thermostats. But it's more than that. It's about revolutionizing how enterprises are organizing their teams, their resources, and budgets around APIs. APIs are a gateway to your product and are what enable your business to engage with consumers in the digital world. In order to compete in this very fast-moving API market, companies are now adopting API-first strategies and allocating budget and resources to allow them to succeed and win. Now, APIs have been around a long time. When APIs first started appearing, it was great. Being able to access data in a structured way without having to go through all kinds of adapters and connectors to get to your database was really cool. I created my first API back in the 90s using Cold Fusion and JavaScript, and it was consumed by Flash controls on the web page. It was a great, easy way to get the data you wanted from the database over HTTP. However, we didn't put much, if any, thought into security for our APIs back then. I mean, who even knew it was there, right? Well, welcome to the future. Okay, so maybe we aren't living in the future we hope for, but things have come a long way since then. APIs are everywhere, and the numbers are growing exponentially. You may be thinking that you're too small or that your data is not that valuable and no one would want to hack your APIs to get to it. You are not fine. If your API ecosystem is not secure, you are risking your data, your customers, your finances, and your reputation. You could lose everything. Now, as long as there have been APIs, there have been hackers who have been searching for vulnerabilities in those APIs. The very thing that makes APIs great also makes them an easy target for attacks. They have predictable and documented methods for usage and typically follow one or more standard with regards to requests, responses, authentication, and more. API security and cybersecurity is of critical importance for every organization, especially now. So we know that APIs are an essential part of almost every organization, but we also know that APIs are highly desired and attractive target for hackers and cyber attacks. Nobody wants to be in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Earlier, Gartner had predicted that by 2022, API abuses would move from infrequent to the most frequent attack vector. The growth in not only the number of APIs, but the exponential increase in API usage has made this prediction all the more impactful on organizations in every vertical. According to the latest Salt Labs report, API traffic has increased by 141%, and API attacks increased by 348% just from December 2020 to June of 2021. In a recent survey among chief information security officers, they found that CISO's greatest security readiness threat comes from APIs. Now for some good news. The number of resources available to help organizations understand and implement a proper API security strategy and architecture has also grown. Now let's start with OWASP. If you've looked into API security before, you might have already been introduced to OWASP, but I'd like to define it just in case. OWASP, or the Open Web Application Security Project, is an international nonprofit organization dedicated to web application security. What they're probably most well known for is their reoccurring top 10 list of web vulnerabilities. But in addition to their list of web vulnerabilities, they also came out with a top 10 list for API security. These lists are an important resource to factor in when creating an API security strategy for your organization. So let's jump over to the studio and take a look at them quickly. We're going to take a look at the OWASP top 10 list for API security now, but remember, this is a starting goal and not an end game solution. These will help you think about the issues that you might have and hopefully reveal some other areas that you can improve in. So if you take a look at the list that we have over here, it's a long list and it's kind of similar to some of the top 10 lists for web vulnerabilities. These are going to play a critical role in the story going forward. So pay attention. I'm about to give you the 5 things that you need to survive this API apocalypse. Let's start with number 1. Number 1 is know your data. You need to know what data you have and what data you are providing access to. What data do your customers and applications need compared to what data you're actually allowing them access to right now? You might have data like user info, product info, partner info, commerce transactions, billing. It all depends on what your product is and who your target user is. Only you can know your system and can evaluate the types of data and classifications that you need to provide access to in your APIs. Do you ever find yourself in those situations where you or someone else gets nervous and just starts talking and can't stop, even though you know they really want to? Sometimes this is called word vomit. Well, there's an API vulnerability called excessive data exposure that I like to refer to as API word vomit. So say you call an API to get a user or some other entity. You get back the info that you're expecting and often a whole lot more. Sometimes information like usernames, permissions, IDs, and other bits can be used to piece together a puzzle and provide a valuable key that can be used in unlocking things that you don't want unlocked. Often an API will publish more data than is displayed to the UI client. Now, so it's important to sanitize and filter the data that is exposed to the API, as this can be viewed using other methods. Take advantage of your API gateway's ability to apply data transformation and data masking features to your APIs. Now, attackers are going to look at API payloads for information that could be used in an attack. Pay special attention if you're dealing with any kind of PII data or if you're subject to any kind of government regulation or compliance. You might be sending data that could put you in jeopardy. You also need to take a look at logs and errors. Are your errors leaking information that they shouldn't? Are your logs secure? Are you including too much information in your logs? Is there information in your logs that could be used to launch an attack on your APIs? Number 2 is know your APIs. You can't protect what you don't know you have. You need a complete inventory of all your APIs. Identify all APIs, whether they are in the cloud, on-premise, in a data center, or service mesh. Find all known and unknown APIs. So what are the different types of APIs that are there? Well, when evaluating the security of your API, it's important to remember that there are several types of APIs that you might be using. Some of these you'll probably know pretty well. You have your public APIs, external APIs, open APIs, internal APIs, partner APIs, third-party APIs, composite APIs, and even beta testing and staging APIs. Some of the other types of APIs that you might not be as familiar with are the shadow APIs, or those internal or public APIs that you created but try to keep off the radar. Zombie APIs are APIs that work and are in use but haven't been updated and are probably using outdated security. Then Frankenstein APIs, or the unofficial internal or external APIs that are hacked together to scrape some data in various ways from systems that don't provide official or functional APIs. Say you have a beta or test API out there that's running a different version than the production API, either older or newer. You need to make sure that all your APIs are managed and secured to ensure that your data, your customers, your company, they're all protected. So number 3, and know your user. There's broken object level authorization, or BOLA vulnerabilities. And this is when someone who shouldn't be able to access the resources is able to, even though they are not authorized. Now we're specifically talking about at the object level here. If you're thinking about authorization for an API in general, you're thinking too broadly. Don't assume that an API user, once authenticated, is only going to be trying to access their own resources or ones that they should be. No. Now say I'm logged in as Bob. What happens if I try and read a resource that belongs to Jane? Even worse, what if I try to push updates for that resource? These are just simple examples that can be helpful in exposing a more serious issue that might exist. All resources need to run authorization checks before providing access. Your API gateway can provide a highly granular level of access control necessary to prevent these types of attacks. You can also control access to resources and methods via scope level policy definitions. Next, you have broken user authentication. APIs that are not using secure authentication are at risk of attackers compromising their system using this exploit. How are you handling authentication, and at what level are you handling it? How are you handling the tokens for your APIs? Be sure to test the API authentication system that you're using to secure your APIs. An attacker will take a look at your token handling and try to identify flaws and weaknesses. Next, you have broken function level authorization. Similar to broken object authorization, API endpoints that are used for admin purposes need to secure authorization policies. An attacker might be able to guess an admin endpoint, and an API cannot rely on a client implementing proper authorization. Secure all functions, especially like deleting or calls that result in creating or modifying user accounts or resources that might give an attacker something that they could use to continue further attacks. You can secure admin endpoints and resources with your API management solution to shield your API resources from this exploit. Next, you have mass assignment. In an effort to transform and bind data from clients, sometimes mass assignment vulnerability can creep in. This happens when an API allows data from the client to save properties that the user shouldn't have permissions to update. An attacker might try to send additional properties that are valid, but not for them. If, say, they send a property that would get mapped to a database and give them more rights or access. A best practice for avoiding this is to only use whitelist and not blacklist with your properties. Using your API gateway's policy enforcement and to specifically define the properties that can be updated is one way to protect your APIs and your data from the security threat. At number 4, we have know your tools. There are a lot of products that you're going to use as part of your API security strategy. You need to understand the function for each one in general, and also the specifics of each particular product. Know what features or product that this product may or may not have. There are some key ones I want to hit on real quickly here. There's web application firewalls, or WAFs. WAFs can be great at detecting suspicious traffic based on known algorithms. This might be based on the frequency of calls or errors, IP ranges, or a multitude of other identification points. You need to do appropriate testing to know the limitations of your WAF and know how it integrates with your other security products. Next, you have API Gateway and Portal. This is going to be the core to your API security solution. If you're not using an API management solution for your APIs, I would highly recommend looking at this first. Next, you have API security products. Often, Organizations already have or are looking into API security products to complement API security that's provided by their API gateway. These products are often broken into categories based on shift left or shield right. I'll give you a quick version, but there's some fantastic API security vendors out there that can go into much more detail about how each of their products fits into the API lifecycle. Shift left is referring to shifting your security focus to the beginning of your API lifecycle process and integrating it into the design and development of an API, which works to protect it in every other step of the API lifecycle, all the way to the retirement of the API. Shield right is just talking about the emphasis of continuing to protect your APIs at runtime and beyond. Now, doing this will allow you to provide a defense against unknown attacks using a combination of artificial intelligence and machine learning and defined algorithms and policies. Now, mobile applications are out of scope for this talk, but still important. Secure your mobile apps and access to your APIs that your mobile apps are using. I'll also mention logging here. Most tools will provide some sort of logging, but it's important to know where and how they log as well. Also, check the logging in your own applications to make sure you're in that sweet spot of logging enough, but not too much. If something happens and you're under attack, your logs are going to be a valuable resource for you and also a potential target for attackers. Other tools that you might be familiar with, but if you're not and you're in API security, you need to be familiar with them, are Postman, the Stoplights tool set, Burp Suite, Zap, Open API fuzzing tools. Now, security misconfiguration is one of the items on the list, and it's probably one of the most common issues leading to security exploits. While human error is tough to protect against, you can use an API gateway to shift some of that responsibility to shared and global security policy definitions, which can then be applied to large collections of APIs, thus avoiding this security issue. You can have the best products in the world, but if they're not configured correctly, they're not going to be doing their job of protecting your APIs and your other assets. Number 5 is secure everything. Secure your data, your APIs, your organization, and your future. This is where everything from the previous 4 steps comes together. You need a holistic solution for API security, and you will often have more than one product you're using together. Now, this makes the number 4 key, know your tools, even more important. You need to know the features and limitations of each product and how they work together. Do they operate in line or out of band? How does your API gateway work with the other shift left and shield right API security tools that you might be using? You need to secure everything. Take a look at a few of the vulnerabilities I'm listing here. You have lack of resource and rate limiting. Now, rate limiting is placing restrictions on how many API requests can be made per hour, day, or month. Without proper limits on access to resources, an attacker can easily overload your API system. Rate limiting can also slow down hackers when they're trying to get maybe guess at codes or passwords using automated techniques. Using features like rate limiting, throttling, and other threat protection policies in your API gateway and API security tools, you can block distributed denial of service attempts, limit large payloads, stop SQL injection, monitor traffic, stop other attacks. You can be doing all this. All these things could be affecting your APIs and your other resources. Next is security misconfiguration. Now, I know this was also in key number 4, but I'm mentioning this once again because it is so common and easily corrected. Make sure you know your tools and how to configure them correctly. Now, API injection attacks can also come in the form of malicious code that a client might try to trick an API into executing. APIs often have to interpret unknown data, and a vulnerability can be exploited if the API blindly executes that code. SQL has been around for over 40 years, and while most security tools provide a pretty good job of catching SQL injection, it's not the only type of injection that can happen. It's also important to never trust your API client, even with internal consumers. By defining data types and schemas and validating all requests through threat protection policies defined by your API gateway and API security products, you can prevent SQL and other types of injection attacks. And for a bonus, we have API security strategy and best practices. You need to document your API security strategy. Document your processes, the tools you use, the people responsible, the tests you run, document it all. API documentation. Make sure your API documentation is secure. What do I mean by that? Make sure that it's up to date, has the latest examples, and be sure you're not including things that could lead an attacker to a vulnerability. Next is testing. Use the many tools that are available to you to scan your APIs and make sure your API security is covered. Vulnerabilities can often sneak in with code logic that's changed between releases, so don't depend on previously run tests. Automate what you can and integrate those results with the scheduled manual tests that you also run. Next is understanding false positives and false negatives. Now, I'm not going to go deep on this, but understand the differences and how to handle these throughout the testing process. And last but not least, keep learning. Things change very fast in the world of API security, and it is to your advantage to keep learning in order to understand these changes. Now, you also want to make sure that the tools and products you're using are also keeping up. The goal of all this is to equip you with the basics, but there's so much more that you'll need to learn and understand with API security, so stay vigilant. There are also some video resources here that you can use to continue your learning journey. Now, here you can find a variety of API and API security related resources covering everything from API security, API first, API best practices, and more. Also, check out some great blog resources on API security. Now, Colin updates a great newsletter and website at apisecurity.io, so you need to check that out. Also, you can check out my website at brenton.house, and I can provide links to more resources there. I also encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn by scanning this QR code or by going to linkedin.com/in/Brenton House. And feel free to ask me any questions there as well. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel to stay up to date with the latest in API security. And thank you all for being here. And I will take a look to see if we have time for any questions then.
Yeah. Yeah, Brenton, amazing. The visuals were so great. It was watching a great movie. Scary, but still good. I do have a question. The question came in, tools to monetize APIs outside of Rapid API. So if you want to touch on that.
Tools to monetize them?
Yeah.
So monetization, I'll just hit on this briefly, but we have a whole series. Actually, you can check out blog.softwareag.com. A little plug. We just did a whole series on monetizing APIs, but there's two different types of APIs, direct and indirect. Direct is where you're actually charging people and they pay you money for access to your APIs, but there's a whole broader aspect of indirect monetization for APIs that, in fact, probably most people are using to leverage and their existing other products and help monetize those as well. So it's a really broad subject, but Matthias Beal just did a series there with videos and blog posts that I would highly suggest you check out on that.
Okay, thank you. And then last, we've got just one more minute, but Brenton, the security falls on everybody. Who owns it? How do you navigate that across development, SecOps, ops, those teams? Well,
I guess you could say the short answer is that everyone's responsibility is security, but a lot of times the security falls across different areas. I mean, you have design, development, testing, documenting, deploying, and more. But depending on the size of your organization, you might have the role of CISO or the Chief Information Security Officer. If it's a big company, sometimes that role is responsible ultimately for kind of the security, and then it kind of goes on down from there. Other organizations, it might be IT, someone in IT that's directly responsible for security. But again, it really is everyone's responsibility. And whether you're in development, architecture, or where you are, even product management with APIs, you need to know what's involved with API security and be able to solve those problems together as a team.
Yeah. It's wise words. Brenton, thank you so much. That was amazing. And I know you've given us a lot to chase down for more information. So Brenton House with Software AG, thank you.